Welcome to In the Know with Neo, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Moore, and for those who aren't aware, Neo is a student-led social justice initiative that amplifies the voices of underrepresented small business owners within the Cincinnati community, and we're excited to share this week's episode with you. Greetings to those tuning in to In the Know with Neo. I'm your host, Joshua Moore, and this week I have the grace of speaking with Laurence Jones. To give a quick background, Laurence graduated from the University of Cincinnati with degrees in accounting and finance, while also participating within the Darwin T Turner Scholars Program. While preparing for today's conversation, it became evident that Laurence's impact, experience, and expertise throughout his career ranges across many functions, businesses, and communities. But just to name a few, Laurence is the president and co-founder of RiskVersity, which is a risk management consulting firm, as well as CyberSure LLC, which helps organizations understand and identify their exposure to cyberattacks and security breaches. He is also an official member of the Cincinnati Business Courier Leadership Trust, a member of UC's Equity and Inclusion Committee and Audit and Risk Committee, on the Linder College of Business's Business Advisory Council and Business Fellows Advisory Board, and past president of UC's Alumni Association. And trust me, this was only half of it. So if you're interested in learning more, check out Laurence's LinkedIn profile, which I learned he still has to update more. So be in check with that, which is in the description below. So with that, I had the pleasure of connecting with Laurence during my sophomore year here at UC, as well during my internship with We Prosper Technologies back in 2019 and 2020. And we've remained connected through various ways since then. So I'm beyond excited to catch up through this conversation today. But first, Happy New Year, Laurence. And I'm wondering, how has 2023 treated you thus far?
Happy New Year to you as well.
That was a lot.
It's a lot, but it is a lot, right? It's going well so far. I know we're only 12 days into the year. College football was winding down. NFL is ramping up towards its peak goal. So It's been fun for sure.
Good. We like to hear that. So a little bit of background on how the podcast came about, such as In the Know with Neo. It was a new initiative, as I said, when we were revamping the stages of Neo as an organization. And with your work, I'm sure you're familiar with measuring the risk of decision making or not. So I'm excited to take a deep dive and gain your perspective and insight on the questions we have in store for today. So let's get right into it. The first question I have for you is, if someone asked you, who is Laurence Jones to you, kind of like an elevator pitch for those who don't know?
Well, I'm somebody that really embodies and has the passion to give back. Giving back is really ingrained in our family, but it's to whom much is given, as much is required. So I really live by that. Now, sometimes the family's like, "You're gone so much," but when they understand the impact that I do in the community, they're really proud of me in that sense. So for me, it's really for those to know that I'm not just about me; it's about helping other people.
I love to hear that. And I think it's something that I've come to understand. That's what life's more about, is helping others through the gifts and talents that you have. And it's something that continually came up as I researched on your career and the things that you're doing. And then secondly, can you give a brief overview of some of the work you're involved in the present day? As we stated, it's a lot, but maybe just like another elevator pitch of the work you're
gonna squeeze me down, right? On the business side, really focused on again, helping others, whether that's overall risk management for their organization, trying to help them grow and manage risk through that process. Whether that is, or on the cyber side, or focusing on DE&I, but on the nonprofit side, giving my time back, I really focus on social services and government, social service, some government stuff, as well as higher education. So I think all three of those things really drive the next in our community and the next in our world, and so that's what really has me going on. Since you made me squeeze it down, that's where I'm focusing on a high level.
Okay, sounds great. It's like a Swiss Army knife in the flesh.
Agreed.
So I found when you first came to UC, you started in the College of Arts and Sciences and then later transitioned on into the College of Business. So I'm interested, what sparked the change of heart and the change of mind, which led you to where you are today?
Well, it was less of a spark and more of a need to make a change, right? So as a young lad, my great grandfather, who I had the pleasure to know and spend some time with, had this vision for me to be a pharmacist. He said, that's going to be an in-demand thing, for a long time. I said, well, okay. Well, so that's what I wanted to do, because kind of, instilled that in me. And so when I came to UC in arts and sciences, that was going to be my track. And as I got into all the biologies and the chemistries, and when you have adjunct professors or TAs that are involved in class and teaching stuff, and not being able to get across the language barrier in the subject that I was already struggling in, I said, this is enough for me.
Yeah.
I made a quick left turn. I made my way over to Linder College of Business.
Nice. Yeah, I can resonate with that. I'm glad I took my last chemistry and biology courses in high school. So
you were lucky.
Yeah. So secondly, for the next question, the first thing I took notice to while researching was your steadfast commitment to the University of Cincinnati community, from serving on committees and boards to attending events such as the Onyx and Ruby Gala, and even hanging out with business fellows, student trips on our Chicago trip back in 2020, which was a bit of a coincidence, but was an amazing time nonetheless. So I'm interested in your perspective, what makes UC so special to you, since you not only graduated here, but remain an integral part about what goes on in and around campus?
Well, I think it started with the love for UC basketball.
Okay, yeah. I came across that when I was doing my research.
I love the basketball, and so in middle school, I'm not a very tall guy now, and I really wasn't a tall kid, but I played basketball in middle school, and our coach had some connections to UC and knew Bob Huggins. So as a team, we got to come to a couple of games, we had to go in the locker room, and after the game they're eating Subway and all that kind of whatnot. So I really instilled that in me, and so my dad enjoyed UC basketball as well. Unfortunately, he's an Ohio State football fan, but we won't talk about that here. And so through that, wanting to come to UC, to stay at home, I did have a scholarship to go to Ohio State as well, but had the Darwin T scholarship here at UC, and so that's what drove me here. So kind of follow that passion, and by having a scholarship, that really, I always wanted to give back, but because I didn't have to pay to go to school, had this other, it's not a burden, but it's really, how do I pay this forward and really be involved, because someone else gave their treasure and their time to allow me to go to school, at no cost. And so that's what really drives me to be impactful here on campus.
Yeah, and I think that's cool when you mentioned that, because just putting the different pieces from the research I've done, a lot, or really all of what you do is instilled in paying back and helping others. And even just from a young age and being in college, you still have that connection of who helped you then and how you can help other people now. And I found a quote from the video that I saw on the Linder College of Business's YouTube channel, and you said you feel like I can help them better than the generation before them. So anything I can do to support that effort, I'm excited by that, and it definitely is resonated in the way you speak about UC and just helping others. So the next question I do have is, so at NEO, we understand the importance of representation both in the classroom and in the business world, and you displayed this many times throughout your career. But one of the most empowering facts I uncovered while researching was that you were the first African-American president of UC's Alumni Association. And I'm interested, since that's just such a large feat and has such significance to that and relevance, and it's prevalent in our community, how did this make you and those around you feel, and what message do you believe it communicates that it took so long for this feat to occur?
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's kind of packed as well. So if you need me to go one at a time,
it is packed. I'll try to pull it all in from what I heard you ask. Being involved through the Alumni Association first as a young alumni, it really was about starting my career in networking, right? So to get around my peers and other alumni coming back to have conversations with the new alumni, that was really my first motivation. As my career started to kick up, I moved to the Dayton market for work, and so it wasn't as easy to be involved, and so I took a step back. And I'll never forget Jen Heisey. I don't know if it was an email or a text. That I think text wasn't as big of a thing as it is now, but she reached out to me to say, "Hey, let's talk about you getting re-engaged, in UC." And I'm like, hey, now's a good time for me, because I was covering both the Cincinnati and the Dayton market for my firm. And it's like, yeah, let's do that. So we went to Rusty Bucket, and she laid out the opportunity to get involved on a committee at the Alumni Association, and I joined the finance committee with a background in accounting. That's kind of where you tend to get steered towards first. And so through there, got to understand the operation of the Alumni Association. At the time, Myron Hughes was the executive director, and got to know him really, really well through that process. So it was valuable to me to do that. But then the chair of the finance committee decided it was his time to roll off, and they're like looking around like, Laurence, it's you. So that really started that trajectory. Because when you're on finance, you tend to know really what's going on across the organization, and positioned me very well, I think, to then be that next leader. So it really wasn't about, in my mind, about being the first African American alumni president. It was just like that was my next in my trajectory of being a leader inside the organization. And then I found out, even though there was pictures on the wall, I never really paid attention to it because there were so many around there. You kind of see them, you kind of, hey, I know that guy, I know that person, I know that gal. But then it's like, you know what? You just realize you're the first one. I was like, oh, wow. I guess, it was kind of a surprise. And I think it really was at the time where the university was also paying more attention to diversity and inclusion in the community and on campus. Not saying it was perfect, but it was really that time that was really taking that stride of being a better inclusive community for the University of Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's a really great story. And I think as you were speaking, and I just like continually putting the pieces together, and there's just different, as you mentioned, there's different stages from like where you're going through and how you got on the Alumni Association and then became president, and then continually were involved on campus. So it just seems that you keep finding holes and pockets and gaps where your experience and perspectives are needed, and you're more than willing to help and fulfill those needs where
it's
they
like
are.
A magnet.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't choose for these things to come about, but it's just, I'll tell you a story, and I think it'll help help it make sense. When I came on to the Alumni Association board, we had not a power outage here, but when I came on to the board, Tony Yates was on the Alumni Association. And like the great guy that he was, God rest his soul, we would go to breakfast, and he would just instill in me things that at my young age, still wet behind the ears, I wouldn't have really understood. And one of the breakfasts that we were having, he said, if you take nothing else away from our relationship and conversation, is you need to be a professional problem solver. That applies to everything that you do, both professionally, in your home life, and friendship, whatever the case may be. In sports, if you're a quarterback, if you're the point guard, you're solving problems, in real time on the floor.
24/7.
And I live with that. So I think this magnet thing happens where I hear something and I raise my hand and make a comment or identify a problem, and somebody else has always told me, hey, if you're gonna have if there's a problem there, you have a solution. If there's a problem there, have a solution when you raise your hand to do something. And so on the foundation board, you kind of rattled off some of the things I was involved in there, and I may not have updated this yet, but through one of our meetings and talking about how important DE&I is, and it should be for the foundation to really match our student population and where we're going as a city. This was still during COVID, and we weren't even in person. We were online. I said, well, what are we gonna do about this DEI thing? And at the time, Troy Neat was the board chair, and he said, well, Laurence, would you mind chairing that committee? And I got silent, right? I'll get back to you on that. But it was a quick follow-up to say, hey, you're the right person, to do this. And it's hard for me to say no to UC and for things that are going to make an impact and make a change someone after me. It's hard to say no to that. So I think that what you're saying, I think that's kind of why it ends up working out that way, because I'm trying to be a problem solver all the time and so much. So I think, that my wife says, I don't need you to solve my problem, just listen. So it's hard sometimes even in that context where I just have to
hold back.
Hold back, yeah. I'm wired that way now.
Yes. I think that perfectly transitions us to our next question, because one thing I've noticed throughout my 4 years in Cincinnati, being from Columbus, is that many people grow up here, attend college here, work here, and they leave a legacy here. So I'm interested, since you were born and bred Cincinnatian, how have you seen the minority business environment grow from where it was to where it is today? And I do have a follow-ups, but we'll keep it from.
I think we've made progress in that regard. There's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lack of access to capital and the resources that the majority has access to. but it's better. I think with supplier diversity programs and some other programs that are designed to really help level the playing field, it's made it better. But again, there's still a long road to go.
Yes.
Where African Americans or other underrepresented population, the people of color, still have one extra barrier to get through. But even in that regard, I'm having conversations with folks who have money and with lenders to say, how do we help change this landscape so that people who have these great ideas can be funding? They talk about light ship capital and focusing on, again, women and minorities who have ideas, because it's less than 1% of those folks get, venture capital dollars. So it's better than it was.
Yes.
But it's still not where we needed to be.
Yeah, and I think this is a testament. I've only been in Cincinnati for 4 years, and I've seen the growth and seen the DI&E become more prevalent. But as you stated, there's always that next step to be made. And I think you're one of the thought leaders in that area. And the next question that I do have, it's kind of a selfish question, but if you were asked to define risk, let me step back. To follow up, what do you think are the next steps in order to sustainably empower minority businesses of the future? It's kind of a hard question.
I just had this conversation at lunch the other day. I really think it's about continuing to provide programming and opportunities, not only for access to capital, but access to knowledge and the resources, right? Because as you start a business, you need to know an attorney, you need to know an accountant.
Yeah.
So these other resources that when you have a different life path to get to college or to your first job, you may not have all those resources around you. Your parents may not have those friends. I have friends that I grew up with that their dad's best friend was an attorney, and then his best friend was the accountant. We didn't have that in our community, right? And so I think having those resources both in our community who know each other to support each other, but also to the greater economy, having those resources made available and having access to that, or programming or education, so you understand that when you put a business plan together, that you need to think about insurance. You need to think about risk, not just I have this great idea, I think I can sell it and hope it goes well. There's so many other things that are part of business
100%.
or running an operation than just having the idea and hoping to sell what your idea is.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I've seen working at the Center for Entrepreneurship here at UC, as well as working within the startup community for a couple of years in Cincinnati, is that there's always that next step when you have an idea. It's like, oh, I need to do this, and then, oh, I need this. And then it's just like a continual waterfall effect until you think you're at the end, but there's always another step. So kind of pivoting from that conversation and topic, one of the coolest aspects of your journey, in my opinion, in business, is that you've had the opportunity to experience both the corporate side as well as the entrepreneurial side of business. You worked at Ernst & Young as well as Brixey & Meyer. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And then as well as your entrepreneurial side of business, beginning at the tail end of 2014. So I'm curious, in your personal experiences and perspectives, what do you see as some of the similarities, differences, and like benefits and consequences of both the corporate side of business as well as the entrepreneurial side?
So I think that the corporate side typically is going to give you structure, right? They typically have well-defined programs and things that are in place, education to teach you as a young career-minded person, right? And then there's usually lots of resources, right? There's somebody to call to do this, somebody to call to do that. This whole department handles this part of the operation. This one does that, right? And as an entrepreneur, you tend to not have that. Yeah, you're wearing all those. You and you. So having a partner sometimes make that a little bit easier. But even then, you're splitting up some of the things, and maybe you're balancing out your strengths, and then and you tackle those items. But as an entrepreneur, it's still a lot to handle and a lot to do. And in the morning you're making marketing decisions, in the afternoon you're making financial decisions. Then after lunch you're talking about how do you price this contract right to not lose money. You're trying to figure out, is this a loss leader scenario? Do we want to buy this client? Are we okay doing that because it's better to have this client on our client serve than it is to make money on them? Then at night, you're then figuring out, what did I do all day? I still have to do the projects I sold last week, right? And so you don't have a team to give that over to. But I think as an entrepreneur, as you grow, if you aspire to have a a full-fledged organization, you may then start to layer in those resources inside of your business. And so going from the corporate side to going into a startup accounting firm at Brixie & Meyer, which you mentioned, we started out in a basement, right? So I left a Big 4 gig, went over to a casket company because everybody dies, right? So it's great job security. It wasn't. But to come back into an accounting firm, starting up from scratch, I had a fold-up card table and a kitchen chair. That was my desk.
Oh, wow.
And I think I had to share it sometimes, right? It's not a lot of space.
Standing at times.
Sometimes you're standing at times, right?
Created a standing desk.
But that gave me the bug for entrepreneurial spirit, watching the two founders there who I knew from Ernst & Young develop that and be a part of that flow. It gave me some of the fundamental blocks about how to prioritize what you're doing, as you're growing, your business. And I've been fortunate enough to take some of those nuggets and apply those to my business, but then ultimately went back and partnered with my old firm to create our cyber business. So it kind of came full circle. So it's that constant grind, but I love the ability to be nimble and move quickly and not have all the red tape you'd have to go through sometimes for a decision in the corporate world. And I can never see myself, going back. I get job offers and I get, recruited, and they throw big numbers out there. And sometimes it's nice to want to take that paycheck that comes on the 1st and the 15th or the 15th and the 30th of the month, the freedom and the flexibility and just the sheer pride you have having your own thing. It's money really can't. Money can't, really can't fulfill that same feeling, and I get to be a problem solver.
Yes. No, yeah. And as you were speaking, I've even learned a lot from the journey from Ernst & Young to Brixie & Meyer. So that's why I love having these conversations. You get to see what happens behind the curtain that you might not see on LinkedIn or on different events, and that you have conversations with. So that's one thing I really enjoy. And going on to more of like Neo's mission, since you were familiar with Daniel when he was in Blue Ash. You're familiar with Nora and the work that Neo does, with one of Neo's missions being to sustainably empower minority-owned small businesses through data analytics so that our clients can make more informed data-driven decisions. This goes hand in hand with the work you conduct at RiskVersity. I saw on your LinkedIn profile, it says you were there to enable organizations to proactively manage exposure to risk and promote long-term stability through effective risk management, in which I assume data is a large component of the work that you do within that process. So I'm curious, what role does data play in the organization in regard to risk management?
You do some phenomenal research, let me tell you. Data's king. You have cash and you have data, right? Those two things really lead whatever it is. Sometimes, depending on the scenario, one might be more valuable than the other. And so from risk management, there's a lot of different avenues you can take, right? And so there is, data around what's happening, in your business, just as kind of touch points to help you make decisions on, do you want to take a risk on a new service line or a new product line, right? It's the market data, right? So that's not sensitive data in all cases, but it's data. But then you have the data that you're crunching, internally, that could be a competitive advantage for what you're doing versus others, right? If you're an AI and how fast, think about, Google. Part of that is how fast when you hit search, how fast, and it tells you this came back and such and such. They want you to know that whatever you need is going to be the fastest, right? And so sometimes those types of things are important. How fast can you deliver? At Amazon, it's about, you click it now, you can get it in one day, right? So sometimes it takes a lot of data to understand how you can deliver on your mission, how you can deliver on your customer promise. So while we don't crunch all that data, we're asking those questions to our clients to make sure if it's proprietary, how are you protecting that, right? That's the risk side of that, right? And then that's kind of the organizational risk. But then there's the customer acquisition risk, and it's other data. So data plays a large part. We're not always crunching it, but we're asking questions about it, or we're helping them protect that data.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of different moving pieces within risk management, as well as how it plays in with data. And another kind of shorter question I have, and related to that, is what advice would you give someone in high school or college that's interested in pursuing a career in risk management?
That's a good question. So if I can nail this, I think we might be able to solve the workforce problem in insurance and risk management.
We're trying one step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time. I think educating people on what this industry isn't, because I think when people think about this, it's really focused on insurance and the visual of an insurance salesperson with a briefcase knocking on doors, typically selling life insurance, right? But the industry of insurance and risk management is so much larger than that, right? And helping people understand that every day you wake up, you're managing risk.
Yeah,
and it's really it's your daily moment. Your body does it automatically, right? You breathe in, your brain's telling your body to do X, Y, and Z, and if you're short on air, your body's automatically managing its own risk so that you survive, right? If you're cold, your body warms up, right? And so understanding that you can be selective in an industry to go focus on higher ed has so many risks between the students and the faculty, the research. If you have a hospital, a health system connected to the university, you could just get absorbed in that. Or it could be manufacturing, it could be logistics and supply chain. There's so many areas that you can be a subject matter expert in around risk. But just taking a step back and saying, if when I decided I wanted to ride a bike, you had to manage risk. You were scared you're going to scrape your knee. Do I pedal? Do I steer? What do I do? But it's a process. And it really all applies if you just take a step back. And you think about any startup organization was a risk taken. Of your time, your talent, obviously your treasure, right? You had to invest in it. If no one else invested in you to create that business, it was your own money. You took a risk, right? So people were always managing risk. They just decided to make a career out of it.
I love that. I think hearing you speak over risk in the way that you position it and speak on it with clarity, I have one question. It's kind of a personal, selfish question. But how would you define risk? I looked it up on Merriam-Webster, and it said the possibility of loss or injury. So what would Laurence Jones' definition of risk be?
I mean, that's one aspect, right? So you buy insurance typically to manage, a loss, right? Whether that you buy car insurance, so that if you run into something, there's an insurance policy to manage the financial risk to that, right? So when you go to get your license, they say, do you have insurance, or do you have the financial wherewithal to pay for this, out of your pocket? And most folks can't do that, so you have to buy, a auto insurance policy. So, but risk can also be, as I mentioned, risk for growth, right? To take a chance on something, right? We have Apple products because someone decided, I'm going to go do this. There's a spaceship that goes to the moon because someone took a risk to figure out and tinker with how to get from the ground up into outer space. We have cars that are almost autonomous, right? Those were business risks to really differentiate the market. So this is a great topic. I talk about this all the time since I now have an electric car that I have to plug in at night. It's, there's a lot of naysayers even back up further than that. When you had a horse and buggy, the combustible engine was a disruptor. And so to invest your money, your time, and energy to disrupt the horse and buggy concept was a risk for growth. And that became the standard.
I like the risk for growth.
Right.
Piece.
It really. And then then now you have electric cars disrupting what we know as the norm. Not going to get into debate about whether or not one thing is more eco-friendly than the other for the environment, but it's a different way to get around. People still ride. There's still cowboys. That ride horses to get around. Right. It's not obsolete. It's just not the most efficient thing. Right. Fuel vehicles, right? What they call them, ICE, and then you have electric. So there's all these different options you have, but there was a risk taken to create that business model and disrupt the market. As we knew it at the time, cell phones in your hand. You have a computer. Now, nobody's gonna do that. But if you walked Inspector Gadget, he had the watch on, or the Jetsons. They were doing all these things that we now have easy access to, right? And so while risk is normally thought of as something that is, no, don't do it, stay away from it. risk can also be that calculated positioning of, pushing the norm, the status quo, being the disruptor to create the next thing.
Yeah, and I really like the piece on risk for growth because, like, when you're having those conversations, there might be naysayers or people that think you should go one way or another. They'll say that's a risk, but then I guess you could rebuttal that would say it's a risk for growth, and that you've balanced the benefits with the risk and the consequences of maybe not doing it. So I really enjoyed that. And then this question is more on the fun side. I was doing my research, but as I was scrolling, I saw that you earned the 40 under 40
that was
award,
some time ago.
which was issued by the Cincinnati Business Courier. So I'm interested. How did it feel to be honored in that way?
Well,
it's definitely cool. It looks cool.
It's cool, right? So you have to apply, and then people have to vote for you to then make it to the 40 that are under 40, and I was able to do that well before I got to my 40 mark. So I'm thankful that folks believed in me, and I was worthy of such an award. But in this community, it definitely creates a group of folks who say, you're one of those too, right? It's a good feeling to have been considered, that you've achieved enough things that were noticed. People realized that and wanted to give you an award for it. So it's fun to see the new classes come out and see it on LinkedIn. And you
stay
say, hey, hey, welcome to the club.
For sure.
It's a fun thing for sure.
Nice. So going back to more of the UC situated questions, being that you graduated from UC and were involved in the campus and the community, it's changed tremendously within the last couple of years and so on. So I'm curious, what do you think of the present status of UC's community, and what are you looking forward to in the future? Here we go.
I've experienced a lot of change at UC, from how the university operates, what it looks like aesthetically, right? When I came to UC, it was the commuter school, right? There were dorms on campus, and folks stayed in dorms, but there was more parking available on campus because more people were driving in. Sigma Commons was a parking lot, right?
Wow.
And so you're fighting for that was cheap parking versus the garage. You wanted to get that pass, but to really transform the campus to be one that was going to be, and this was vision, right? To change the aesthetics of the campus so that people, when they did campus tours from out of town, like, this is a place
I want to go here.
When there's 1,500 cars in the middle of campus, that doesn't scream residential, and I want to stay here and be a part of this fabric. I might get ran over by a car in the middle of campus, right? With having this walkable internal part, there should be a road that you can drive all the way through campus. And so think about,
I should see these
spring,
pictures.
We had quarters, right? So think about spring quarter. The weather just changed. People changing, wearing shorts and whatnot. Windows down. Yeah. Music bumping.
Through campus.
You pimping. Parking lot pimping. All the drive slow as you can. And everybody see you and everybody sing along to your song, right? Get the incense going, everything. So now you can't do that. You can't drive a car right through campus. You got to park on the outer pieces and walk in and walk through. They've beautified dorms. They opened up a new dorm recently. Every year for the last 7 or 8 years, we've continued to break the enrollment record. Right, they can't find where to stick.
Linder's popping now.
Right, yeah. Where do we even put folks to live? Right, they're buying new apartment buildings, kind of off campus to become student housing because it's changed so much. So what I really see is that we've gone from a commuter campus where there was connectivity, but not what we're seeing today from students. People stay on campus, so they're all really over study. It's a community now that we didn't have. So as alumni president that we talked about before, when you would call on people to be engaged and come back, they only had that diploma connection. They didn't have the community connection because you came to school, your class was over, you went home, or you went somewhere else, you didn't come back until you had another class. Now folks are staying around, they're in the dorm, and it's more of that, right? And so I think that's really changed the dynamic of what UC is and what UC is on a national scale, because we have more folks coming in from outside of the state than we do inside of the state. So and it creates new relationships for culture change when it's not all Midwestern Cincinnati people, or even from Columbus, when you have folks from San Diego and Phoenix and Montana. that changes the
It
environment, gives
shows.
people the ability to learn something new from people they wouldn't otherwise, get to learn from at this age in their life.
Yeah, and I think especially in like current student perspective, it's cool to hear how it's transitioned and how it's changed, because it allows you to be grateful for like what we're experiencing on campus and such the community aspect that's here through the different organizations, the different colleges, and what all goes on behind it. And I think speaking on the connectedness, it goes great with the next question. So in the video I mentioned earlier that's on UC's YouTube account, you stated and spoke over the mantra of you have to give to get and then give to get to give, which is a bit of a tongue twister. I'm not sure if I got it wrong, but I think I got it right. But there's a very powerful message behind it, and I sat and thought about it. So I want to know, you spoke over it briefly in the beginning, but what type of legacy do you seek to leave behind within the community in Cincinnati and overall? And for those listening who may have not have thought about what type of legacy they seek to leave, what advice would you give them? Because a legacy is a very interesting term and concept, and it's something that I've been thinking about recently, and a lot of my friends have been speaking of, and I think that's what everyone's attempting to do, but they might not conceptualize it in a way where it's like, okay, this is my legacy.
Right. And so the quote that you rattled off so well, and you got it right.
Good.
It's not mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Much like be a professional problem solver wasn't mine, but I've embodied that, right? And so another mentor of mine, Carl Satterwhite, who's done phenomenal things here in the city and really helping advance, minority-owned businesses, and he's very involved in giving back that way. When I first met him, that was a part of his conversation, right? To give, to get, to give, right? So you give to others to get something in return, to turn around to give it again, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It's like your community. You buy over here, then those people make money, and you create an ecosystem, right? And so that could be for business or on a personal side, right? From a spiritual perspective, if that's what you believe in, and my nature of wanting to give back and give, to others, I don't always expect anything in return from you. I feel that if I do good to you, that good is going to come, from somewhere else. And so
100%.
again, I give credit to Carl because I do live by that. I didn't create that. I think he even had a license plate at one point that said that. But to the legacy part, I don't really think about it, to your point, if people don't really conceptualize, what that means. Occasionally when an award comes up or you get asked to speak on something, you may pause for a moment and think, oh, wow, okay, maybe I am creating, some legacy, but I'm not doing it so intentionally that it's this, laying down of bricks to say I need to have, this is my legacy I want to leave behind. It's not really there yet. What my legacy I feel like is that people, if I were to expire tomorrow, that people knew that I did the best that I could every day, that I tried to help others always. That's something you got to be selfish for yourself. But by and large, I really want to help other people be at their best. That is in my core. And if that is what people know about me, and if that's my legacy, I'm cool. Now, other folks' legacy is that they have a whole building named after them. And sometimes that naming of a building isn't because they liked you so much, because you gave a lot of money.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so if I have it to give to that level, then great. But if someone sees value in naming something because it embodies what they're trying to accomplish for their mission, because I was attached to it, then great. But end result is that, if I'm not here, and Laurence, oh yeah, I do that. Guy's a great guy. That's why I say that's really what's more important to me, that people will speak well about me when I'm not in the room. That's what I believe is my legacy. As long as that happens, I'm good. If more than that happens, as I hit the mega millions or strike it rich, there's a different story. So
No, yeah, and as you mentioned, the piece of like when you're not in the room, I think you've done a phenomenal job of that from so many different people, different groups, and like diversity in campus and beyond. A lot of people know your name and have such great things to say about you. So
you just want those down. You gonna read them to me?
I could name them off. But transitioning into our last question, you talked over like you don't think specifically on the legacy you're building until those specific moments where you kind of have that self-reflection of what you've done and like how it impacted other people in the environment that you're in. So for the last question, It's what advice would you give to freshman year Laurence, if you could give any?
Oh, freshman year. I think I'm not a first generation, college student, but I mean, not everybody, before me I had cousins and some so I had some experiences to lean on. I think it's really to embrace the experience. I came to a commuter school, so I really didn't lean into the college experience until it was almost too late, right? And so I think I'm playing a little bit of catch up, as a part of my give back now, because I didn't have that as a student. One, because the environment didn't really truly provide for it, but I didn't lean into it like I could have, right? And so if I could go back, I would really find a way to be more engaged in student organizations. So I've started that a bit earlier. That's the main thing. And the second thing is to find your calling. You might not get it right, but don't be afraid to do it quickly. I made a change from A&S over to Lindner, but I probably did it later than I probably should have, just because you're afraid to disrupt. I came here to do this. You got to tell everybody, and I'm going to do your pharmacy now. And don't be shy about that. But when you don't have the family and the folks to ask, is it okay if I change my major 17 times? Yes, I did. I did 22 times, right? If you don't have that, you feel like when you show up, what you signed up for is what you're supposed to finish with, and that's not really what most people do. There's only a small percentage that finish where they started. And that could be based on what they felt they wanted to do, and until they got into it and did a co-op and felt that experience, really like, I can't see myself doing this. This isn't me, right? And then you switch to something else, or there's an economy shift, or there's a new thing that happens that you want to go and follow, and you want to be a part of this new trend. So don't be afraid to research that. You're a researcher, and make the change that fits you, because when you don't want to have a job, you want to have a career that doesn't feel like work. Because if it doesn't feel like work, you can make the biggest impact for yourself and those around you. If it's a job and it's tedious, that vibe comes off to your employer, to your colleagues at work. It's a whole different thing, and that wears on you over time. You look back 10 years later, like, I was a grumpy old guy, that kind of thing. And you want to be able to, not that every day is going to be a good day, but if you believe in what you're doing, you have a passion for it, you feel like you're making a change, you can always kind of follow your beacon. I think you could be okay. Yeah,
that was really great. And I think that
was not rehearsed.
I took a lot from that take, right? myself. And then there's the first piece you hit on is just getting involved in campus. So yeah, I definitely urge anybody listening, just being in my final semester, I would say getting involved in campus. You mentioned Business Fellows, you're on the board for that, as well as anything NEO and otherwise organizations. Get involved. It helps you grow your network and grow your community, as we talked over before. It really just helps you figure out who you are as a person, being around others and seeing what they're going through. And then you hit on the purpose piece, and I think that's such a important and prevalent topic in college. But as you mentioned, you don't want to have a career. It's kind of more of like you want to have a calling. Like, you're not the position that's labeled on your resume, but you're the person, but you're named after your first name and your last name. So really figuring out who you are as a person and how that transitions into your career. And I think there's a lot of stress in college of figuring out what you're going to do, but it's really like who you are and how you're going to do like what you want to do. But Laurence, we've talked over a lot, from your everlasting love and support for the University of Cincinnati, especially basketball, to how analytics are vital for business in order to measure risk and create success, and everything in between. So I want to say thank you for taking the time to hang out with us on In the Know with Neo, and sharing your time, resources, and memories. And I can personally say you've helped me define my career path and direction through the conversations we've shared, and the impact you've had on the Cincinnati community and beyond. So thank you again.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to sit here with you and share.
Perfect. Well, that was another episode of In the Know with Neo. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you're interested in learning more about Neo's mission and vision, follow us on social media at Neo Initiative, or visit our website at neocincy.com.